All right, this video is going to be pretty much pure ramble. So if you don't like ramble, you're probably not going to like this one, but just some questions that have come up on YouTube and a couple of other places and discussions I've had with people. And I just thought I wanted to ramble on about them. Now, in the background, I am going to be doing some work for a project that will be in the future. When in the future? I don't know. I ran into this at the model shop yesterday and thought it looked really cool and just started putting it together. So this is what I'm going to be working on. It's from Tamiya. It's a 1/48 scale kit, and it's this Type 16 maneuver combat vehicle. And you can see that it's an 8-wheeled armored shooty pew-pew thing. And I just thought it looked kind of cool. I mean, it's a modern vehicle, but it's also got kind of a Aliens vibe to it, which I thought was kind of neat. So I'll be assembling this for, like I said, for later video work. Now, one of the things that came up was a question, and I'm sorry that this is going to be going in and out of focus. There's just not too many ways to avoid that. So that's just part of the ramble. Anyhow, one of the things that came up was a question, suggestion from a good friend of mine, John Hoodfish. And he was talking about, what are some things that you can recommend for modelers getting back into the hobby after having been out a while, because I hear that a lot. When I got back into the hobby in 2006, how old was I then? 39? Yeah, 39. So, I mean, I wasn't an old guy, so to speak, although I guess that depends on your age, because I guess when I was 18, I thought 39 was old guys, but anyway, but as I've gotten older, you have to deal with things like your eyesight changing, and that can happen when you're young too, of course. So any of these tips can apply for any age, but like I said, especially when you're getting older, your eyesight it can change and all that. I think one of the things that has been most important for me is handling the eyesight issue. I had to have cataract surgery. I keep drifting off camera, and I apologize. I had to have cataract surgery a few years back. So, and I could not get the fancy multifocal length lenses put into my eyes. I had to just have the old-fashioned, I can see at a distance and that's it kind of things. So having good vision, of course, is important. I mean, that's important at any age. But for an older modeler, it can be a challenge. Now, what I've done, number one, is I make sure that I use reading glasses. Let me show you just a second. I clip my microphone to them. That way there's always a consistent distance to my mouth from the microphone. But those are just cheap reading glasses. There's the readers. I think these are 2.5 or 2.0 or something like that. And they're, what am I doing here? Going right. Does that go on the inside? Oh, that goes on the inside. Okay, no wonder it didn't look like it made any sense to me. Yeah, you got to pay attention to the instructions. That's one thing you got to do when you're old. Pay attention to the instructions. But, that's for the crewman. Okay. Anyway, sorry. This is what a ramble video is like. So that's just the nature of the beast. But of course, your vision is important. And I wear those reading glasses all the time because I've had cataract surgery. The other thing I wear, and I keep it on my head even if I don't have it in place to use, is one of these optivisors. Now, this is just a cheap little optivisor that I've had since 2007, 2008. There's more of the big giant hood ones and all of that. I like this one because it's so lightweight. And I can just keep it on and flip it up and flip it down and use it as I need it. And I think having those, having something that magnifies has really helped because vision is an issue. I tried using one of those, you'll see the lights, or there'll maybe be a desk mounted kind of a magnifying lens that you can put down and use in front of it. You can put your stuff under it and use it. I find that I tried using one of those many years ago, but I wasn't real happy with it because trying to get things in focus is a combination of getting your head to just the right angle and your hands to just the right angle and the thing at just the right angle and the right distance from the little thing. Whereas with these optivisors that are put on, after you get used to them, it's kind of like using your eyes, if that makes any sense, in that you don't think about it. When you're doing something with your eyes, you don't necessarily think about, I've got to do it. It just kind of comes natural. You move it to a certain distance from your face. You move your face to a certain distance from the thing, and you just do it. And because my eyes are looking through two lenses, it's very natural. Now, some people say they have trouble getting used to these, and it is a little bit of a trick to get used to at first. But what I found was once I got used to it, there was no way I could do without it. No way at all. Because it just, now it's just, like I said, it's just something I just pop on anytime I sit down here at the model desk, so that I don't even think about it because it's just so helpful. Now, another thing that I deal with is my hands aren't as steady as they used to be. I mean, I wouldn't say I have excessive, shaking, but they're just not as steady as they used to be. I think about that scene in Blazing Saddles, and he holds up this hand, and he says, "Yeah, steady as a rock." And he goes, "Yeah, but this is my shooting hand." I'm left-handed, and normally it's fairly steady. Now, I will say what I have found is that later in the day, my hands tend to be less steady. So I think about that when I'm building, and I kind of factor in if I'm going to be doing some really small detail work, painting small things, that kind of deal, then I tend to do that, deliberately plan for that to be in the morning. And so I'll know that I'm going to have the best chance to get that done without any kind of, let me hold this together while it dries, without any kind of problems. Sometimes I get to the end of the day and, my hands are feeling good and I'm not, as shaky or something. So, it varies. You'll learn what works for you. Of course, I learned what works for me, and but just accounting for the fact that may be something you deal with. Another thing regarding your hands and your dexterity is I've got. I don't know. You probably noticed my knuckles look a little lumpy and swollen and all that. I have arthritis. It's not horrible. But it's enough of an issue that I have to, it limits my movement oftentimes, and I have to account for that when I'm trying to do things, which brings me to another point, almost as if I intended it that way. It brings me to another point that because of my difficulty at times with my eyesight, and my hands, and knowing that they're not as steady as they used to be, that I'm not, 25 years old anymore. I think setting expectations appropriately of what I can and can't do has been very important, because, nobody likes to be frustrated and with what they're doing, especially when you're trying to do something for fun. And I think setting my expectations appropriately, like one of the reasons that I kind of slowed down on my effort to learn to paint miniatures is, number one, I realized I just didn't want to put in the time. To really paint miniatures well, you got to paint a lot of miniatures. You got to, as I talk about, put in the reps. And I'm like, there's other stuff I think I'd just rather paint and weather. Nothing wrong with mini painting, but for me, I'm like, okay, that's not my priority. But I also just saw that, okay, this is something that, between the manual dexterity, my eyesight, things like that, it's just more difficult, and I stay away from, I said, well, if this is something that frustrates me, why do I want to just keep banging my head against the wall? If there are other things that I can do in the hobby that I am able to do without the frustration that might come with those. I still find painting minis fun, and I do it every now and then. It's kind of one of my off-camera things that if I'm just wanting to sit down and paint, but I don't want to worry about filming it, or is it going to be for a video, or any of those things like that. I just set my expectations a little more correctly, I guess you would say. Now, another aspect that I've been surprised how when I've mentioned this to some people, that they say, "Wow, I never thought about that." But lighting is really, really a key for me. I have above my desk, I have a couple of just cheap, one up here and one up here. I'll try to remember to take a photo and put it up at this point, but I may not, so sorry. But I have lighting that's really fairly bright, and then I've got this a desk lamp that comes along here, and it's one of those with the gooseneck, and it's got all the LED lights. But not only do I have 3 really bright lights, I've got some overhead lights going on, but I have them all at the same color temperature. And you've got your 3000 Kelvin and your 4500 Kelvin and your 5500 Kelvin, all of those things. And I make sure they're all the same temperature, and that it's the bright white light. It gives me a better feel for the colors that I'm using. But at the same time, by having them all the same color temperature, I buy several boxes of the same bulb. I want to say they're 1500 lumen, 5500K Sylvania bulbs. I've just looked over and saw the box. But I use the same bulbs in all the lights. And so all of the color temperatures are the same. And having that balanced, bright, very white light lets me see what I'm doing much better. Because, I didn't realize how much, as I've gotten older, how your sight, my sight at least, kind of dims. I mean, I can see things clearly, but I realize that in order to see things clearly, I need the light to be fairly bright. That's why, I guess that's why as a kid back in the day we played with light bright, but because we needed, to make things with light. Anyway, anybody remember that? Anyhow, the bright lighting has really made a difference in my modeling. Another thing I've found, and this is a weird thing, and it may just be me, but as I've gotten older, coffee. In the morning, I can drink a couple of cups of coffee, and I feel fine. It helps. It perks me up a little bit. Later in the day, if I have more coffee or caffeinated drinks, I tend to find that my hands shake a little more. So that's another aspect. And then a final aspect, and I'm sure there's more, but that, if I really thought about it, I could come up with. But the other one is, I know for me, as I get older, if I get frustrated, things kind of go off the rails fairly quickly. Not in a bad way. It's not like I start throwing things around or anything like that, but I find I don't enjoy what I'm doing if I get frustrated and I start losing track of things. And, and I'm 57. It's not like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm super senior, but I've realized I'm no longer middle-aged. One time recently I said, well, as a middle-aged man, my wife goes, sweetie, you ain't middle-aged no more. AARP's sending me packages all the time. But just recognizing when I'm getting frustrated and going, maybe it's time to back off. Go out, check my bird feeders. It's an old guy, bird feeders. Go out, check my bird feeders, go look at a YouTube video, go, eat a handful of peanuts and, drink some water. Just something to, okay, don't let the frustration ruin what should be a fun process. So I think those are all things getting back into the hobby. And I guess one more thing that just came to mind, kit choice. I've had friends that talked about, they got back into the hobby and they remembered as a kid building these giant, sailing ships with all the rigging. I mean, the real proper sailing ships, made of wood and stuff like that with the rigging and all that. And they, I'm going to get back into that. And I'm like, you're 73 years old. And your hands do this, and you can't. I mean, you're basically Mr. Magoo. I'm thinking of one dear friend and specifically, and they kind of thought about it. And they're like, "Yeah, you're probably right." Pick kits that fit within the challenges you face, and that goes for anybody, of course. But I think especially as we get older, so. It's probably more thoughts than anybody wanted to hear on getting back into the hobby as you get older, but that's what came to my mind. Now, another user that goes by the screen name of Rusted Beetle, which I think is kind of a cool screen name. Rusted Beetle had talked about one of the videos, I don't remember which video it was, but I was weathering and talking about how, weathering whatever state a model is in at any particular time is indicative of, how it looked at that moment, and that's a consideration when you're thinking about when you're working on your model. And he used the phrase, creating a history. And I thought that was an interesting way to look at it, because whether you're building a historical model that you could, point to as, here's the thing, here's a photo of the thing, or whether it's science fiction, that's really a great way of looking at it, because that's what you're doing on the surface of the model, on the model itself, is you're kind of documenting the history of whatever that thing is, whether it's real or imagined. And I just thought that phrase, I said, I'm definitely going to steal/borrow that phrase. I thought that was a really good visual, kind of a visual word, if that makes sense, of how to look at the work we do, and make sure I'm getting this lined up right. The work we do, that it's creating a history. And so I think that's a great way, back on camera, John, I think that's a great way to look at how we weather these things, that you're showing the whole history of that model from whenever it came out of the factory up until that very moment, and think of all of the things that happen along the way. I've talked about that before, but I just love that phrase, creating a history, because that's what we're doing. And so I think, in terms of, I often talk about narrative weathering, narrative building, that you're not just building it and saying, now I'm going to put on some mud, now I'm going to put on some stains, but you're thinking about, okay, this has been in use for a long time. It's been in a desert environment. It just came back from combat. It happened to rain, even though they were in the desert, it happened to rain, and so everything turned to mud, and then it dried out. And you have this, you kind of build this story so that you have this filter through which to pass all of your thinking about how you're going to do it, whatever it is you're going to do on the model. And so but just that phrase, creating a history, it just, to me, it just kind of just wrapped it all up in a nice package. So thanks, Rusted Beetle, for that comment, and for me, for that idea, that notion. Really is really cool to think about. Now, another person had commented on one of my videos, and forgive me, I could not find, after they had asked the question, it was in reply to a reply. So it's, if you've ever seen how from a creator standpoint, how the comment system works in YouTube, sometimes it can be a little hard to go back and find things. So I could not find it, but I do remember the question. So if you recognize what I'm talking about, and you go, hey, that was me, I apologize, but I do appreciate the question. But they had essentially asked, can you go over the tools that you use, kind of, what are the best tools to get, what are, the must-have tools, and things like that. And I don't, again, this is another thing that comes with age. I don't remember my specific answer to them, but I got to thinking about it in kind of a general sense, and how I could talk about it in this form that is happening right here now. And one of the things that I did try to convey in my answer to them is that, as I've gotten more experienced in the hobby, I'm always hesitant to say good, because that is a very subjective thing. But I think I am experienced, because experience comes through making an effort to do things, and making mistakes, and learning from those mistakes. And I know I've made a ton of mistakes. So if you count mistakes as how experienced you are, then I'm very experienced. Anyway, I talked about in my answer that sometimes simple tools are the best. I mean, that's probably kind of a summary of what I restated of what I talked to them about. But I used to be a tool junkie in that I was constantly looking for the next great tool to do the next magical technique, you know, and I count anything that we use in modeling as a tool in the sense that it gets a job done. So this is a tool and this is a tool. So I mean, there's some things that I tell folks, hey, you want to get those. Like for stirring paints, get one of these, one of these little spinny tools of stirrage. They're they're great. Don't get hung up on the brand. Somebody said, should I get the Badger one or should I get this other one? I'm like, get a doggone tool. It don't matter. You know, I've had to replace those things every 5-6 years because they just burn out sometimes. A battery will, go bad in them, or it can be all sorts of things that happen. So, but they're just good to good. That's a good thing to have, as far as tools. But I think the best way to evaluate tools is, what is your need? Like I'm looking now over here, I've got some jars full of brushes and tools and all sorts of stuff like that. And I've got all these pairs of tweezer types sitting over here. I used to think it was very important to have some at an angle and some that were straight on like that and had very pointy tips and all of that. And I have some others laying around here that came in a set that I probably paid too much for. This is what I use almost pretty much 100% of the time. Just some cheap, I don't even know where I got these. I may have stolen them from my wife. That's where a lot of my modeling tools have come from. Same way with knives. This happens to be a Hobby Lobby brand. But, I've had people ask me, do you get what is the really famous brand, the Swan Morton, and then I think that's what it's called. I may be wrong. There's of course the X-Acto brand. And I remember one time X-Acto came out with these blades that were like, gold plated or some kind of, premium kind of stuff. And people have asked me, oh, do you get those? No, I just get the cheapest knife handle I can. I get a big old box of cheap knife blades. And if you've heard me talk about it, I don't even switch them out a lot because I like working with a dull blade most of the time, except for certain things like canopy masking and stuff, rather than a really sharp one because I think it's safer. When it comes to other tools like paintbrushes, I keep jars of these paintbrushes. For the longest time when I was learning to paint minis, I spent way too much money on natural hair brushes. I tried Winsor & Newton, I tried Artis Opus, Da Vinci, Raphael. You name the names of brushes that people talk about getting, I tried them all. I ended up, the ones that I liked, Rosemary & Co., and they tend to be the most affordable. And I didn't even settle on the pure, or the Kolinsky sable, but the pure sable. You can actually get those here in the U.S. In other words, I started looking at it from the standpoint of what works, what just gets the job done. It's not the tool that's going to make you better. Yeah, it's easier to paint fine detail with this Rosemary & Co. Series 99 than it is this brush, this giant synthetic brush. So I'm not talking about taking a ridiculous view of it. Sometimes I'll say stuff like that. I talk to modelers and I'll say, look, just get a really, if you're concerned about brushes but you don't have any money, just get some decent cheap liner brushes. And these liner brushes like this that I have, they're like 15 cents a piece. I bought a whole bag of them. Yeah, they die, I guess you'd say, pretty quick, that they lose their tip and all of that. But I can get enough uses out of them that it it works just fine. And I can get it to work just like a really more high-end brush. But I'm not painting for Golden Demon or any kind of contest or anything. But people say, "Oh, so you should just not care about your brushes." And I'm like, "No, that's not what I'm saying." But when it comes to the tools that I use, I've more and more focused on what works. You know, I have a jar full of little. These are my pointy hurdy things. Because I used to get all sorts of knives, and I've got this that's a saw blade, and I've got this that's a sharp hobby knife, and this is a curved blade, and this is a chisel blade, and this is another sharp knife, and then I don't even know what this is, and then I've got a couple of pin vise handles. At most, I may pull out one other of these, because sometimes when I'm doing canopy masking, I'll put the new good blade in one of the colored handle knives, and just keep the old blade in here. But 99% of the time, this is what I'm using. And it's the same way with the other tools. So I would say, yeah, there are good tools. Like I like, hold on. These are some really old nippers that I got just at a hobby shop. It may have been Hobby Lobby. It may have been one of the local hobby shops. These are the things that are, $6, $5, whatever. And for cutting big chunks of plastic, they work. At some point, I tried out the Tamiya side cutter nippers. They're like $24. I like these. They're very durable. They work really well. They're not cheap, but they're affordable. I tried the God Hand one time, and they were great. They were wonderful. I realized I don't need $50 nippers. It doesn't make any sense, because for what I do, because I'm going to paint and weather everything, I clip it off, and then I get a file or a sanding stick, and I sand it down anyway. And quite frankly, if I'm using some of these that are a little cheaper versus the $50 things, the fact that I'm going to sand it down. Now, if you're building Gunpla and you're not painting them and you want the really sharp cuts, you may need that. But the point is, identify the need and just find a tool that fits it. If that tool doesn't quite do the job, then look for another one. But it's so subjective, because everybody's going to be different. And often I even sometimes hesitate to make recommendations for things, because like if I say, okay, I use this Hobby Lobby blade or this Hobby Lobby knife, somebody's going to come along and tell me, well, but it's made of a cheaper kind of material that doesn't last as long. And if you use this blade, then the handle has more weight and it'll give a better balance. And, or they don't agree with there's for anybody, there's always something. And I get it. I mean, we're all different. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying I'm right and everybody else is wrong. We know it's true. But no, don't write. I was kidding. But identify the need. Some of the kind of a basic guideline that I tell folks more and more now. You can't go wrong with Tamiya tools and Vallejo products. I'm not saying you need to switch from whatever you're using to those. But if you're not sure, if you're trying to decide, should I get some God Hand nippers? Should I get these cheaper nippers? Should I get some Tamiya nippers? Tamiya. I've never been disappointed with a Tamiya product, ever. I don't. The only Vallejo product I've ever been disappointed with was their primer, their liquid primer that you put in an airbrush and spray on. And even then I found out that I just wasn't giving it enough time to cure, and that's why it was rubbing off. I was handling it too soon. I use Badger Stynel res most of the time if I'm going to use an acrylic airbrush primer. But I also like Citadel. And there, it's not that, I'm not saying that just pick a brand and any of them will work. There are some that I don't recommend. And I won't go into the details, but I don't recommend Army Painter ever for anything. I've been disappointed far too many times. Every single product I've tried from Army Painter, I felt like there had to be an asterisk at the end of it. And don't, I know you can, don't give me the comment, well, they've upgraded their line. They've upgraded their line. They've upgraded their line. How many upgrades is it going to take to get to the point that it works as well as what I've already got? You know what I mean? Somebody told me, they said, yeah, but Army Painter now is as good as Vallejo. And I'm like, and I've had Vallejo all along. So when it comes to products, try something out. See what works for you. Don't go out and buy a whole new set of paints, but test one or two. See what you think. When you run out of your old color, get a new one. If your old color is really bad, if it's not doing what you want, then yeah, replace it. But as far as tools go, don't get hung up that the tool is going to solve. If your goal is to make the model look better, sometimes people look to tools to be this magic path to it, and it's not. It's not. You can use the most expensive blade of knife on your models, but if you're not careful about how you're shaving down those nubs and, scribing in panel lines and things like that, all that super sharp knife is going to do is just cut even faster. That's all it's going to do. So, that said, I think some basic tools that I don't ever want to do without. One, some nippers. Get some nippers. I recommend Tamiya, and these right here are actually from God Hand. I think they're the GN 125. They're just their basic nippers. These are really good. But have some nippers. Have a hobby knife or two, just a couple of the handles. I find that it's helpful to have the number 11 blade and then the kind of curved blade. So if you need to cut like photo etch parts, you can kind of roll it down like that. That's handy to have around. I like having this cheap little drill. That's really handy. What brand is it? I don't know. I think I got it again at Hobby Lobby. There's no special, the drill bits are inside of it. I couldn't tell you what the sizes are. When you need to drill a hole, you just need to drill a doggone hole, If the thing says 1.5 millimeters or, 0.5 millimeters, well, I look at this and I go, man, that looks about right. And I drill the hole. If I try to stick the thing in and the hole is too small, then I get a bigger drill bit. If I made it too big, I go, oh, well, figure it out. Fix it. I don't get hung up on it. Sanding sticks. I prefer sanding sticks, but these are not expensive sanding sticks. The local hobby shop, Hayes Hobby House in Fayetteville, North Carolina. If you're in the area, go by and visit. They've been in business 58 years. Wonderful place. I get these. There's nothing special about them. They just come in a pack of 7 with all the grits that I want. I get those. Like I said, the paint stirring thing, Tamiya extra thin, any kind of extra thin welding cement. But I also keep some of this type of stuff around when I need bigger joins and things like that. I like Walther's Solvaset for decal setting. But honestly, if you stripped it back to where I had a knife, nippers, my thin cement, my Optivisor, and a couple of cheap synthetic paint brushes, I do just fine. So again, it's kind of hard to make a broad brush statement of here's all the tools you need, and you need to pay attention to brand and all of that. Over time, you're going to collect stuff, but like I said, I am more and more an advocate for less is more, because I have spent so much money. I'm looking around my model desk as I'm talking, and I've spent so much money on tools, and various brands of paint and all of that. And I like with my brands of paint, I have a lot of Vallejo, I have a lot of Citadel, and I have two of the first and second wave of the two thin coats paints. I like all of them. I don't have a complaint about any of the three, but I've decided when I need to replace a paint, unless it's a very specific color that I can only get with one brand, I'm just going to go with Vallejo because it's easy and it's reliable and it's affordable and it's very good quality. You know, if you like Citadel paints and you don't mind paying the higher price, the premium price on it, then stick with Citadel. If you like Army Painter and you're happy with it, I know guys that have been using Army Painter for years and they don't understand my objection to it. I don't like Ammo of MIG paints, acrylic paints either, or Hitaka, or Humbrol acrylics. I just, and you may say, oh, but they've improved them. But it comes back to, well, everybody seems to be trying to get to this level. Everybody always compares it to, it's as good as Vallejo. It's almost as good as Vallejo. Sometimes they'll say, oh, it's better than Vallejo. But find a paint you like. I tested this years ago. I got some of the cheap craft paints from Walmart and did an entire project with that, and I made it work. Was it ideal? Nah, it wasn't as good as Vallejo, but I made it work. So get the things that are available to you, affordable for you, and that when you use them, you go, I like these, and make them work. That's the key. Just make it work. And then as your needs change and you see, okay, I need to try this other thing, or let me try this, or let me try that. And you find that it does have a noticeable improvement. Sometimes I see creators on YouTube that will be working with one product and suddenly they start using this other product and they're like, oh, this one is so much better. And I've used them and I'm going, there's really not that much of a quantifiable difference. And, no surprise, that new product they're using, suddenly you see that logo appearing on their model desk and now they're sponsored. But, well, of course. And just for clarification, nobody sponsors me. There's a few kind people that go to my website, johnbias.com, and they click the button for support, and they send me some money on PayPal because they just like what I do and they want to support it. So if I'm supported by anybody, it's a few people who watch, and I am grateful for it. But I and not that I'm opposed to it. I get it. If people are making a living, they're gonna say, yeah, I like this. Well, of course, if that's how you make your living, that's how you pay the bills. But, and I know I've rambled way off topic, but if you watch my videos, you know that's how I do. Find the tools that work. People tell me all the time that, oh, I've tried this new glue from such and such, which is really good. It dries perfectly clear, and it doesn't have the strong adhesion like the To Me Extra Thin, but it won't fog things up, and it'll do this and it'll do that. And I'm going, okay, you're basically using this, or have you ever used this and thinned it with Pledge or Holloway House Quick Shine or some kind of gloss medium? Boy, that makes a really strong bond right there. You get what I'm saying. Now, there's some specialist tools that I do have. Like I just thought about, I've got this oil expert from VMS. This helps oils dry faster. This is one of those tools that I'm like, okay, this is the one that you find that you spend the money on, although this isn't expensive. That's the kind of thing that, okay, and that's hard to list which ones like that I use, because that one's kind of a unicorn anyway. Find the tools that you can afford, that you have access to, that fit the needs you have. Don't get caught, as I did, in the trap of finding a tool and then looking for a need a way to use it. That's what really happened to me. So just common sense. Don't spend a whole lot of money until you see a really compelling reason to do so otherwise. Now, to kind of go along with that thinking, talking about tools and using different tools and all of that. In one of the questions that came up or comment on a video or something like that, I don't remember precisely. The question was asking me, which filler do I use? Do you use this one or do you use this one? And the answer that I teased out can basically be summed up in avoid single-use thinking, single-source thinking in most things. By that I mean, I don't use Sprue Goo or Mr. Surfacer. I have them both available. And I've learned from doing it when one is better than the other, because there's factors that come in. How big is the gap? How much, like if you're needing it to have some kind of, whatever gap you're filling, if you're needing it to have some kind of structural stability, you don't want to use Mr. Surfacer, because even if it will fill the gap, it doesn't give any structural stability, whereas Sprue Goo may work a lot better. The same way with, somebody says, oh, you need to fill that with super glue. Well, that may work, but again, if you need, like if it's on an aircraft and there's a join, wing to fuselage join, I don't want to use super glue, because even though super glue is for bonding, it has real, like if I glue a thing on, like here's a surface and I glue it on with super glue and it's like this. Well, the super glue is really strong if you try to pull it away. But if you come along and hit it with shear force, that super glue, it's weak like a baby fart. It just doesn't hold. And so if you're needing stability, yeah, something like Sprue Goo is going to be better. But you don't have to make this complicated. Sprue Goo is just where you take a jar of, say, Tamiya extra thin that maybe is getting near the bottom, and you cut up some pieces of sprue in it and it dissolves it, and you can just, it's literally like liquid plastic. And yes, I've used the liquid putty kind of stuff. I think Sprue Goo is a better solution than that. But sometimes I don't worry about, do I have a jar of Sprue Goo handy? Sometimes I literally take my knife and I shave off I just sit here and do that for a little bit and shave off some plastic shavings and put some glue where I want it to go, and put those plastic shavings on there and move them into place with my knife. And when they dry, I sand it down. So there's a lot of ways you can do things, but having a few options, because knowing which tool is going to be better at what is going to help in giving you better options about how to deal with things. Because if you only have Sprue Goo and you have, let's say you have a gap that has a hairline gap, but there's supposed to be a panel line there. Well, the Sprue Goo is not going to help that, because you don't want to close it up. You just want to make the hairline gap disappear, but leave the panel line. That's where you put in Mr. Surfacer, clean it up with some alcohol and a Q-tip, and now the hairline gap is gone, but the panel line that you want to have filled in is still there. Whereas if that same thing, if you didn't want, if that line was not supposed to be there, then Sprue Goo may be a better option. Maybe just stretching out some sprue and laying it in there. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways. So I do say that learning multiple methods, another question I got in the past, sometime in the last year, how do you add, they said, what method do you use for adding dust to your models? And I'm like, there's a lot of methods that I use. I may use pigments, but I may use an airbrush. I may use a thinned acrylic paint. I may use enamels. I may use oils. Number one, what do you have? One time somebody said, look, all I have is just some very basic Vallejo paints. I don't have a lot of fancy products. I don't live in an area where I have access to get any of that. I can't afford to order a whole lot of stuff. And I was like, look, if you want to make something look dusty, take your tan paint and thin it down and start applying it so that it looks like dust. And after a while, you'll figure out how to make it work. You know, this and some water can make it happen. Yeah, now if you have maybe some glazing medium or some kind of matte medium, or, there's other things you can get fancier, but a lot of times it's look at what you have, make it work. If you can add something to it, but don't get caught thinking that the only way to do panel lines, there's one creator who I really like, but I've heard them. It's been quite a while since I've watched their videos, to be fair, so they may have totally changed what they say, but they used to say, oh, you can't do weathering with acrylics. And I would always chuckle when I'd hear that, and I go, no, what you're saying is you don't know how to do weathering with acrylics. That's what you're saying. So if somebody says, oh, you have to use enamels, you have to use oils, you have to use acrylics, figure out how to use what you have. Because, like, for example, if you learn to weather your models to a high level that you're happy with it, you like it, and other people are going to go, hey, that looks really good. Not that we're really worried about what everybody else says. If you learn to do it with acrylics, you're going to have a strong set of skills that are going to serve you well. And then if you ever decide to start using enamels and oils, yeah, there's going to be a shift because they work differently, but you're going to be so familiar with how to manipulate the product that as soon as you learn the particulars of that product, you're going to make it shine. So there are some times where one product is better than another. I use Solvaset because I think it's better than Microsol, but if all I had was Microsol, I'd make it work. Thinking in terms, again, of, what tools do I need? If you went to somebody's woodworking shop, they wouldn't say, hand me the drill bit, right? They wouldn't just have one drill bit. They're going to have dozens, if not hundreds, of drill bits, and they're going to have some that have different shapes on them. They're going to have some that have different purposes, and some are good for this and some are good for that. And then there's going to be the kind of little router things, and there's all sorts of these little things. So now I know just before I just said keep your tools simple, but there's a balance when you're looking at your tools. There's a point where you also, like I'm saying, you have to go, okay, it's not always this or this. Sometimes you want to have both. Now, for me, if I can keep it simple, I know 20 different ways to deal with, say, filling gaps. But I've gotten it down to where it's either Tamiya Putty, Mr. Surface, or Sprue Goo, or super glue. And I guess a fifth way, you just make sure it fits really well and you squeeze it together. There's a lot of other methods I could use. There's a lot of other products I could use. But what I've found out is that those 4 or 5 things, that covers 100% of the scenarios I need to deal with. And so adding in another product in the mix doesn't matter, or settling on only one of those is not helpful. So again, focus on what's going to work, what's going to serve the need, and what's going to be helpful to you. All right, well, I'm going to call this long, boring ramble done. I actually had more questions on my list, so I'll save those for a future date. And, and if you have, I try to answer every question I get on YouTube. and because I appreciate every one of them. But sometimes there's some that they ask that I think this might be something that is interesting to others. So please, ask away. I will answer questions. And if you ever read through some of my responses, I try to answer in detail. I don't try to, just say, well, figure it out. If somebody says, well, what do you think about this? The other day I realized I wrote like 400 words in response, 400 or 500 words in a response, but I wanted to be thorough. So I don't mind people asking questions because they often give me ideas for doing things on models or for answering questions in a video or, maybe writing a blog article or something like that. So anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for putting up with my rambles. I'll do these periodically. I'm probably going to be doing them between projects. When I finish one project, I may do a ramble video or a deep thought video or something like that. And it just buys me a little time as I work on the next project. So it has strategic value to me also. So look for this Type 16 thingy sometime in the future. And by the future, probably maybe this year, possibly next year. I don't know. I build these, I put them in a box, and then when the mood hits me to complete it, I pull it down and that becomes the next video. So I just thought this thing looked cool. So anyway, it fits so nice. Oh my goodness, this is turning out to be such a gem of a little kit. So if you like the look of it, pick it up. It was affordable. It was like $31. And it's just a great little kit. So anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for leaving comments. And you know the deal. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.